Hey artist, today I want to show you how you can use paper to make a paper weaving. This video that I'm going to make actually has two parts. The first video is how to make something called a loom. The loom on this weaving is the brown part. It's the tool that you weave on. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. The second part of this video is going to be how you put it together. So watch this one first, and then you can watch the second video, how to weave with your paper. I also have another video this week about how to use string and yarn to make a friendship bracelet. So some of you may remember making this with me before in art class or something kind of like this. So it's still a great project and a great way to use different interesting pieces of paper. But if you'd like something that's a little bit more of a challenge, watch the video about how to make a friendship bracelet, okay? But for this first part of the paper weaving video, you're going to need to create your loom. And it doesn't matter what color paper you have or what size paper you have, but you're going to need to start off with a piece of paper. I have this brown piece of paper here, and I've already started to make some cuts on, but you need a piece of paper. You're also going to need some interesting pieces of paper, maybe that have a little bit of color or pattern on them. And if you don't have any fancy paper at home, you could also look for some recycled materials like some of you did in last week's art challenge. So the side of a cereal box is very colorful sometimes, or you might find some interesting pages from a magazine or something like that. It doesn't really matter what size they are. We're going to use these in a minute. But the first job we have is going to be to create our loom. And the word loom just means a tool that you weave on. Some looms are made of wood and they're really big, like so big they would fill up your whole room. And other looms are smaller. Some of you I know have used those little plastic squares where you have a loop and you use it to make a weaving like you could use for a hot pad or something like that. But our loom today is going to be made out of paper. So by the end of this video, you're going to have something that looks like this. I'm going to turn it sideways so you can see it a little bit better. And you'll also have some long, skinny pieces of colorful paper to weave with, okay? So the way that you do that is start off by taking your piece of paper and folding it in half. So try to do this as carefully as you can. Really carefully line up the corner and the edge of your paper, and then use your finger to make a crease on the side. And then turn your paper back around this direction, okay? Now, you want to double check before we start with our next part that you have your paper pointing the same way as mine. My fold is at the bottom, and the part that opens like a book is at the top. That's really important, and I'll show you why in a minute. So after you've got that ready, grab something that you can use as a straight edge. If you have a ruler, that works great, but if you don't have a ruler, you can also use something like the edge of a book to make a straight line, and you'll want a pencil. So take your pencil and line your ruler up at the top of your page, and then scoot it down just a little bit. Maybe about as far as 1 finger wide, or it can even be 2 fingers wide. That would probably still be all right. But once you've got your ruler lined up, you're going to make a straight line across from one side to the other. And then before we do anything else, double check that your line is on the side that's opposite the fold. Okay? Is yours in the right spot? Good. Now, I've already started with the next part on mine. So this is what your paper is going to look like in a minute. I've got my straight line across the top, and then I've got some vertical lines. This one's horizontal. I've got vertical lines that start at this line I made with my pencil, and they go down to the fold at the bottom. And let's see how many I have. I haven't counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I made 7 lines on mine. There actually isn't a magic number that you have to have. You just don't want to do this. This is what not to do. Okay, you see on this paper, I made these lines really close together. And the problem is when I unfold this to start weaving, you actually could weave with this, but it's just going to be a lot more complicated. So I don't think it's very good to start that way. When you start yours, try to make it a bit more like mine. And the way I made these lines was I took my straight edge, your book or your ruler, and I lined it up at the side of my paper. And I scooted it over and I made a straight line with my pencil that started at my line I made at the top and it went down to the fold. Then I scooted my ruler over a little bit and I did it again. Start at the top, go down. And I tried to keep them as straight as I could. One trick you can do to keep your lines really straight is to use the top of your ruler to help you. So when I scoot it over, I'm going to try to make a little square where my ruler is lined up with my line at the top, and then I'm going to push it down with my fingers so it doesn't wiggle and make my straight vertical line on this side. See? So I'm going to keep going until I get to the end, and then you'll need to get out your scissors. Now, before you start cutting on your loom, watch me do mine first, because I'll show you again some mistakes where you wouldn't want to do it that way. So I already did my first 2 cuts, so I'll keep going on this one. And before I cut, I'm going to check that I'm definitely cutting with my scissors starting at the fold, and I'm going to cut until my scissors get to my line at the top, because that line is kind of showing you like the safety zone. I don't want to keep going past that line because I bet you can imagine if I did, I would just chop the end of that paper off. And I want them to all stay attached together to make my loom. So I'm going to keep going. And I also don't want to stop my scissors before I get to the line. That's going to make my loom really uneven. So I'm going to try to be as careful as I can to drive my scissor car all the way up to that line and then stop when I get there. Okay? So once you get them all finished and you unfold your loom, it's going to look like this one. Turn it sideways so you can see better. Like I showed you at the beginning, it's all attached together. And I've got these little strips in the center that I'm going to use to weave with in just a minute. But before we go to the second part of the video, you're going to need to get some long and skinny pieces of paper ready. And the nice thing about this is it doesn't matter exactly how wide or how fat they are. You can make some of them a little fatter and some of them a little skinnier. And it also doesn't matter exactly how long they are. You don't want them to be like really, really short, because if you make one that's really short like this, it won't go all the way across your loom when we start weaving. You want it to be at least as long as your loom. But if you have one that's a little bit longer when you're finished, we can just trim the extra off when you're done. Okay? So you can use your ruler or your straight edge to help you with this if you want, to take your fancy paper or whatever you're using. You can line your ruler up at the side, scoot it over, and then use your pencil to make a long straight line that you can follow when you cut it. Or you could maybe have someone in your family help you cut your straight line pieces. But when you're finished, you want a good collection of them. If you run out, you can always cut more. So there's not a magic number for how many you need, but I think I've got a pretty good collection here. So I'm going to move on to the second part, how to weave. So once you finish and you've got your loom and your pieces ready, you can watch part 2 of this video, how to turn this into a paper weaving that looks like this. Okay? See you then.